And we'll go here, get me on here, participants, and put me, spotlight me. Okay, good morning. So today, the pattern that I'm going to tie came out of Phil Rowley's book, Flies for Stillwaters. And the pattern I'm going to tie is a Kamloops Caddis Pupa. So I think there might be some caddis around before too long here, so you might want to think about it for being around here. The hook is that I'm using is a 200R, and I'm going to tie it on a little larger hook than what it says in the book, so you can see what's going on. This was a number 8, and this is a number 6 that I'm going to tie on. This is a number 6, and that's so that you can see more detail. So I've already killed the barb on this hook. I'm going to stick it in the vise, make sure it's in there good and solid. The thread is all of 8/0, and we'll start right behind the eye, and we'll put some thread right down the shank of the hook. A lot of this is going to be dubbing, and I want to make sure that the dubbing doesn't spin around the hook uncontrollably when I'm trying to dub the thread down with the body material. Now, take the thread right back to basically where the barb of the hook was before I mashed it down. So just slightly around the bend. This hook has a reasonably good bend to it, this 200R. Now the ribbing on it, it calls for Superfloss, which I didn't have. So I looked to see what I had for floss, and it's supposed to be brilliant olive, brilliant green rib on this thing. So this is just embroidery thread, but it's way too bright if you have, and too thick if you don't disassemble it until you've got a few skinny little strands. So I've done that. I've taken the embroidery thread apart, and I got a bunch of strands here. And I'll pick one that I think gives enough color, but out being overwhelming in terms of color. And I'll just put a soft loop on there, right at the back, and run my thread right down to where it ends in the bend. Tie that, slip that into the material clip. Now, the body is a dubbed product called Arizona Synthetic Dubbing, and it's a natural peacock color. So it's a synthetic, so it doesn't adhere really well to the thread. So a little bit of dubbing wax is not a waste of time. And I'm going to start with small pinches of dubbing. This is going to take a while because I'm going to do a dubbed thread, and I don't want to make great big clumps of dubbing on the thread to make the body really thick to start off with. I want to be able to control somewhat the shape of the body as I put the dubbing on. And so I'll do it in stages. And so I'm going to get, maybe 3 times the diameter of the thread in terms of dubbing. And I'll try and make it fairly even. And I have to work with where I have my workshop or workspace here in front. I've got a board in front of me, so I can't make the dubbing that I'm going to use too long, or it ends up bouncing off of the board in front of me. And then I'll just wrap over top of it in a reasonable chunk until I get the size of body that I want. And we're going to try to taper this a little bit. So I'm going to start a little skinnier at the back, and then as I get up the thread, get up the shank of the hook, it will, a little more dubbing, a little bit more stuff there. Just be patient. This takes a while, particularly with this slightly longer shank on the number 6. And again, I don't want to do this in great big whacking clumps of dubbing. It makes it harder to control the shape of the body that you want if you put too much dubbing on. So you see, I'm just getting a little bit of a taper from the back to the front. And when I get to about there, I want to get just a little bit in front of halfway up the hook shank. And I want the maximum body size to be fairly robust when I get that halfway up. So I can make the dubbing noodle just a little bit bigger as I get up the shank of the hook. And it just takes a little bit of playing around to do it in manageable amounts of dubbing. So we'll just keep going. You can see it's starting to get a little bigger now. And another advantage of using fairly skinny dubbing rope is if you find that it's not smooth and there's a few places where you need to make it a little bit more even, you can always make a very thin rope of dubbing and go back over what you've already done to fill in the gaps. So it takes a minute or two. And I want to get eventually a little, just a hair more than halfway up the shank of the hook. I want to leave a reasonable amount of room at the front so that the thorax and the front of the fly can be accommodated on what remains of the hook shank. I found early on when I was doing these that I tended to crowd the front of the hook too much. So I'm getting pretty close to there. Yeah, that's about it. So it looks like this is going to be a little more stubby body than what you would think for the length of the hook, because with these particular pattern, you want a fair bit of room at the front to get the thorax and the head of the fly in. So that's about it for where I'm going to put dubbing. Again, just a little more than halfway up the shank. Then I'll take my ribbing and I will counter wrap it. And I don't want a whole lot of ribbing. I'm going to do maybe 4 or at most 5 wraps up the body of the fly. When we get there, so you see that it adds a little bit of color and without being overpowering. Okay, so now when we get there, this is when I'm going to put on my shell back, or the back of the fly. And what I've got is pheasant tail. And I actually took a pheasant tail and I sprayed it with a letraset fixative to kind of hold it together a little bit rather than just stripping the barbules off. I'm going to cut off a section that's maybe 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch wide on that pheasant tail out there. So it's a good, same as the width of the body of the fly. And I'm just going to use the thick part of this to make the shell back for the fly. I'll hold it down and wrap down to hold them in place and then bring back. So now there's my back ready to be folded forward. And I'll come up here a little bit so that these bits are out of the way, secured, and trim them off. Now, the thorax of this guy is going to be primarily peacock herl. Put the thread back. And I've got some really long peacock herl. I'll take 3 or 4 strands of it because I need to make a fairly robust thorax. And if you have really fuzzy peacock herl, you might not need as many strands, but this peacock herl is a little on the skinny side. So I have several strands. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put it down on the, in front of the in front of where the pheasant tail is tied in. Wrap it down. Take my thread back. So it's all in right back to where the back is tied in. I'm going to wrap my peacock herl around the thread, and I'm going to wrap it clockwise, because if I do wrap it counterclockwise, the first wrap will go kind of funny, kind of comes undone. So now I can wrap around, and I'll come up probably halfway to the eye to build a thorax. And I'm going to build a pretty bulky thorax. Probably build most of it, use most of this peacock herl. And get it good and robust here. Need to get some more wraps around the thread. And the purpose of wrapping it around the thread is as you wrap the peacock herl on, it will keep that peacock herl from becoming detached from the thread and sticking out all over the place. And then I can trim that off. Now the next thing this pattern calls for is what's called Swimeretes, which are basically a couple of little legs that stick towards the back of the fly. And once again, that's pheasant tail. And all I'm going to do is take basically two or three little strands of it. That's 2. And I'm going to lay that, turn my vise sort of sideways. And I'm going to lay it on the thorax with the tip just at the bend of the hook. And I'm going to put it on the side and just a little wrap into the thorax to hold it in place. Trim the excess. Get out of there. Got to get that out of there. There we go. I'm going to take another pair from the same feather. Just try to get 2 strands. It's a little tricky, but sometimes it happens easily. And turn it over the other way and put that same length of peacock pheasant tail and put that didn't go very well. Okay. I just want to hold it in place with my finger, and then if I can, this is always, these little placements are a little tricky if you don't do it right. Okay, looks like I got that one in the right spot. You can see there's one on either side of the body, pointing slightly downwards and off to the side on either side. This one I want to shorten up, so I'll just give it a little tug to shorten it. There we go. Just a little more forward. You can, by pulling it back and forth, you can match the length of them up pretty well. Okay. And then we pull the back over the top to make the back of the fly, and I want that to flatten out across the peacock curl. That's about right. Hold my finger down so that it sits there, and then tie over top and tie in front. And then I can trim the stuff out of the front here. Now this fly is supposed to have a little bit of a beard. I'm just going to make sure all those swimeretes are the same, relatively the same length on each side. Doesn't matter if you trim the ends off. They're going to be like trailing legs. Okay, so that's that part. Make sure it's nice and square on the sides. And then I'm going to take some peacock curl and tie a loop for later. I'll get that aside. So then now the rest of the thorax, the first thing I'm going to put under here is what's called the beard. And the beard is going to have a little bit of different color and different glistening color to it. So I'm using some ice dub, a little bit of, just a teeny bit. And I'll take a chunk of this out and stretch it out so it makes kind of a little noodle of material. And I will lay that down right where the thread is hanging, about to the end of where the thorax is. And I'll just do a light wrap there. Pull the front back. Oop, I didn't want to catch those swimeretes like that, which I did. That's better. Okay. And then I'll pull the front back and just give a little wrap in front of that. So now I have this beard, and that one's a little long, so I'm just going to take my scissors and trim it shorter so that it only goes back as far as the thorax is when it's streaming from behind. And the whole idea is just to give a little contrast and a little bit of shine underneath the thorax. There we go. And then I finally finish off putting on some peacock curl. And again, I'll take, these are a couple of short strands, so I'll take 2 or 3 of those. I'm going to tie them in right behind the eye of the hook. Oh, come on, get on there. And once again, I'll just take the peacock curl. And what happened to that swimmerette? It went somewhere else. It's not where I wanted that guy. There we are. Make sure I've got my little swimmerettes where I want them. Well, I still have some loose threads at the front. There we go. It's too long, so I'll get rid of him. And once again, I'm going to wrap over the top clockwise around the thread. And then I'm going to build a head. Just between where the thorax ends and the head of the fly. And finish off there. make sure I have my little Swimeretes in the right spot. Tug them into place. There we go. And then I'll do a quick whip finish. And the hard, like I said, the hard part is getting these silly little swimmerette things to sit there in the right place. You just have to use your thumb and forefinger to kind of place them there. Make them the right length. You don't need the fine tip. You want them a little bit coarser, so I can cut them a little shorter. So there he is. You see we got little side legs and we got a shell back, and I'll just take a little bit of head cement and I will coat that shell back just a little bit so that it stays right, and then get the whip finish. And that's him. So now we'll stop me highlighted. I'll do this again. There we go.
Thanks, Dave. That was good.
So it's the little swimmerette things are the tricky part because they're fairly small, fine bits of peacock or pheasant tail.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make them too thick because you want them to move in the water. You want them to kind of move sideways and collapse and span again. So it's a little tricky with that. If you could find a really, really fine crystal flash in that sort of bright green color, you might want to try doing it with a crystal flash rather than just a green thread. Add a little more glint to it.
Yep, that makes sense.
So that's
the dragonfly nymph.
It's actually a caddis pupa. It's an emerging caddis.
It's big for caddis.
Yeah, I just put it on this big hook so you can see it.
But you can use it for a dragonfly nymph on that size.
Yeah, that's the normal size. That's a size 8.
Yeah,
and you could do it in a size 10. This is on a 6, and I did it on the 6 so that you could see the way it's put together. So there's the two of them in size 6. So that just makes it easier for you to see, but you're right, I think an 8 or a 10. And it would take a lot less time and a lot less dubbing to do it on the smaller hook. It's a little trickier on the small sizes to get that beard in. And the beard is just, again, a little bit of flash and a little bit of movement under the thorax of the fly. So Florin, you're on.
Thank you. So here we go, bare hook. So this is the outcome of some experiments that have proven to be somewhat successful on both.
That one of the Togan barbless hooks.
Actually, no. This is trout bum.
Okay.
The Togan ones, now that we're talking hook subtleties, the Togan ones are a bit more straight here.
Yeah.
And this one has got a bit more of a curvature at the point, and it's a jig hook.
You're probably regretting I introduced you to trout bum.
Yes and no. I spent a small fortune there already.
Yeah.
But I got some. I like the selection of hooks there. Is quite nice. So I got a whole bunch of things there. But I get my fly materials all over the place. Where I got a bit frustrated with Togans is that the hooks I wanted were always out of stock, and their shipping costs were pretty stiff.
Yeah,
and both them and Trout Bum were shipping Canada Post. So I was like, okay, well, that's an easy one. Anyhow, so this particular hook is a size 8. So what I'm looking for is you can use whatever hook you want. But what I'm looking for is a wider gap. This makes it a very, in relative terms, a short shank hook. And I'm looking for heavy wire, right? So this is kind of as thin as I would be willing to tempt fate with chum. For pink, this is good. Going with thinner wire, I think you'd have to play the fish for longer than it's a good idea. So this way you can put, heavy mono at the front end, 17 to 20 pounds, and you can pull those fish in, even when you get them by the tail. All right, so the thread really doesn't matter. You use whatever you have. I'm just using 8/0 because it's, it's an all-purpose, and it works. It doesn't matter you're tying big flies or small flies. Thinner thread is always a better idea because you don't end up building a ton of bulk. Now the next material is optional. I'm using it for the body, and this is just a tinsel that I picked up at the dollar store last year, I believe. And it's nice. It's flat metallic tinsel. It's very tough. It doesn't get chewed up by fish teeth. And I'm just gonna wrap it on. Do a little knot in the thread. Without a bead, you don't really need to do a knot. You can just spin the vise, but when you have a bead up front, that kind of wiggles the thread up and down, and then it messes up everything. And so you end up with the thread unraveling and so on. So here I do have to put a stopper knot. So here I just start at the front. You can also wrap over the tinsel and then start at the back. This tinsel, you can see one layer does a very decent job of covering. If you use different tinsels, you may want to double wrap like I'm doing here. So this is probably a little bit of overkill. Secure. Trim. Well, that's material number 1. Now material number 2, I'm going to show you a couple of tricks. So one way to do this fly is to just use, you either buy a mop from the dollar store and you take it apart, or you find now there is custom, whatever, mop chenille. What's nice about this thing is it has little bits of sparkle in it. All right, so you can use this. Unfortunately, I could only find 2 colors of this fluorescent green, which is very nice, and then this fluorescent fire orange. But I wanted this color, and you can't get that color. And then this chenille is a little too skinny. And then I would have liked to find something more like this. And again, this is a little too skinny and floppy. So here's one way to do this. You can take, this is some pink crystal chenille that I've had for a while. And I put it on a spool like this for ease of maneuvering with it. So attach this well here at kind of behind the bead. I was gonna say head of the fly, but it's not the head of the fly. Whoops. Again, do a little knot here so that the thread stays nice and secure through what comes next. And then measure about twice the length of what you want your chenille mop to be. So it's here, and maybe I should move the camera a little bit here. You can see, okay? So what I'm gonna do is, once you're satisfied with the length, just grab this and spin. And spin and spin and spin and spin until this thing gets nice and tight and twisty enough that furling may be successful. So what you do is, once it's sufficiently twisted, and you can see how the length has shortened, and this is, as soon as I let go, it starts to curl in on itself. So this is the sign that, yep, we're there. Okay, so bring it to the hook here and give it a helping hand. And there you go, furled chenille. Then, and this is the slightly more challenging part, this is where you need more thumbs and hands and arms and legs and everything else. I was like, these are when I want to be an octopus, so I would be both smarter and I would have all those extra arms. Oh. Okay, broke the thread at the worst possible moment. But a dedicated fly tyer always has a spooled bobbin of thread close at hand. Okay, whew. That was a close call. I mean, no biggie, but I would have probably had to do the furling bit all over again. As you can see, this gives you a custom bit of thicker chenille that's quite dense, and this one is also quite a bright concoction.
Mhm.
Now to keep on with the theme of overly bright stuff, I'm going to add to the front of this some of this that's called plus chenille. Sometimes it's called Fritz. Sometimes it's called whatever. It's just, you know, violently colored fluorescent, dark fluorescent pink. I'll take some of this guy, strip a little bit from the front, so you expose the core, so you have a secure tying point. Tie this guy in. And then again, I need a little bit of a knot here because I'm going to wrap this using the rotary feature of the vise. And I don't want the thread to unravel.
Oh my goodness.
So here again, you do this just like a wet hackle. So pull the fibers back. And wrapping was going to twist a little bit. Don't despair, just pull fibers back. Go again. Keep on pulling with this kind of short shank hook. Of course, you have to watch your fingertips quite a bit. These are very sharp pointed hooks. Here, pull a bit to the back so it goes under nicely, and then back over the top. And I think the biggest challenge for me is to try to fill this gap here behind the bead, because with the jig hook, the bead ends up sitting at a little bit of a funny angle there, and it can be a little challenging. Okay, so I'm keeping this under tension so it doesn't go anywhere. Bring the thread back here and secure once, twice, okay, 3 times. Let's be paranoid. And then move the thread up front, and now you can see the unsightly gap. Now I can trim and do a couple of whip finishes, and that's the fly.
Hmm.
And it does work. And you can vary colors. Another color combination that I had some success with is chartreuse, the chartreuse mop. Did I do two? I don't know.
Yes.
I did. Okay, so let's not overdo it. There you go. So this guy is done. And catches fish like this.
How do you fish it, Florin?
Just like the standard Dave fly. You know, I was fishing them on sink tip lines. It was pretty equivalent to putting a T something on the front end of a floating line. So basically a sink tip line, a piece of strong mono, and dead drift as I can. You know, wet fly dead drift style. So cast slightly across and upstream and try to follow the drift so you don't swing the fly too fast through a school of fish, ending hooking them by the back or the tail or
Florin,
stuff
you
like
could catch coho and Quinson on that.
I shall give it a try, I guess. These are the other this is another version that I think this is the one that I tied for the photo I posted last night.
Mhm.
And here I have a secret material from the discard pile at the local knitting club.
Oh,
So this is, if I remember to bring this on Tuesday, I can share some of the secret material. So it's some kind of a sparkly yarn, but it's a hideous shade of pink.
Please do.
Sorry?
I said, please do bring it on Tuesday.
Yeah, and but it feels fairly soft. So what I did what I did when I used this material is I ended up, so if I do it with this, what I do looks a little bit like this. So I tie this thing on. I put a hook in the vise. This one does need double wrapping because it is kind of thin and doesn't cover the hook very well in just one go. So here I have a piece of it. Then I do this. So now I'm just avoiding the point of the hook. This is a sure way of cutting your materials off. So wiggle around. Can go a bit into the bend. And then come back. A bit of an angle. Okay, good. So if you want to tie durable, this is what you do. You tie this guy off. And yeah, may need new scissors, I guess. That's an ugly that's going to be covered later on. So let's not worry about it. And use some of this stuff. Just a tiny little amount. I have to clean the brush a little bit before I put it on, so I don't end up with too much. This is the very thin stuff that really is very, very runny. So just one thin coat of this. You can probably already see how it's trying to run on me. Before I turn the light on, I'm going to turn it around a bit. Come on, run the other way. Okay, there you go. Then zap it. And this thing, you get the color and all that sparkliness from it. But it should hold up against some toothy encounters. And then you can use, for example, let's do it with the green stuff. The chartreuse version. So attach the chenille. Nice and solid. Then trim it to length. It should be about here. And then one more finishing touch. Take a lighter. Lighter that works would be better. Jeez. This is serious. Ah, there you go. And then play with fire a little bit. Melt the end. That's going to ensure against unraveling, because otherwise you start losing all the plush there. So this would provide some insurance against that. And then another material that seems to work pretty well on these types of flies is this whatever two-tone Fritz. So again, tie it in the same way as I did the other stuff beforehand. Just clear off a little piece at the front. So you have the core exposed, tie it in by the core, which is going to ensure that it is well tied in. And then do a knot, secure the thread, and then wrap the thing around. And that's basically the fly. So that's I spoke too soon, obviously. Okay. So it's fighting back. Okay. Maybe I did not catch enough of that core properly secure. Now I caught a decent piece and I folded it back as well. So now this is locked in. Okay, I can catch a seriously big fish on this one. And the hook is gonna break before anything will come apart. That's kind of how I like to tie flies if I can. There I put a nice little bushy head of this stuff. It just doesn't look like anything alive in nature, but that seems to be the point.
Florin, have you actually fished this much?
I did fish it last year and I had some luck with it when the fish seemed to be off the blue fly.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's a good creamy dessert, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it resembles things you sometimes see in the dessert aisles at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Well, I think that's the equivalent of ice cream for humans for fish.
Probably, I don't know what the flavors would be. I think there's some kind of fluorescent green pistachio with a touch of pumpkin and I don't know.
Yep, I would have to agree.
So yeah, it's similar to the idea of what's the one that they call strawberry shortcake.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's almost the front end of it is a little bit like a blob as well. So
yeah, it's a blobby mop.
mm-hmm.
It combines two of the ugliest, most unreasonable flies known to man.
That's right.
Actually, a booby has the same colors.
Yes, a booby. That's sorry. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's more like a, well, even the blob is similar, but yeah, definitely a booby as well.
So what were you catching with this, Florin?
I was playing with different versions of this, and I was actually catching pinks in Campbell River in your backyard.
Yeah, well, you obviously weren't fishing the blue fly right.
Well, but that's, you know, I need something when I can't fish the blue fly right. So
Yeah.
and other people were struggling with a blue fly, and I handed them over one of these monstrosities, and they finally managed to catch a fish, which was good.
Yeah, no, sometimes they're finicky.
Yeah, so this is a fly for beginners, I guess. The blue
Yeah.
fly is for people like Dave who know how to do it.
Well, actually, it probably would fish that in the river. It would be reverse of what you're seeing. It would be the opposite way because the way the hook is. The hook would be up.
Yes, and personally, I find that to be helpful because my biggest problem this year, both with the pinks and with the chum, was hooking them on the backs. My fly would ride too fast and over the top of the fish, and if I fished too close to the bottom, I would snag the bottom a lot. So I thought that changing over to upside down flies would be to my advantage, and it turned out to be true. I stopped snagging the bottom. I stopped snagging almost completely the fish. And as a bonus, I found out later with the chum, I would get fish hooked on for 10-20 seconds, and then after a few vigorous shakes of the head, because they were hooked not too hard in the roof of the mouth, they'd come off on their own.
Yeah, it's a wide gap hook.
Yeah.
As I said, you could try that on coho because last year those were similar colors to what we're catching fish. You know, it's close enough to an egg pattern, but you know, it'd be different than what everybody else is fishing.
That too. So what time of year would that be?
October.
Oh, it's October. Okay. That's when the weather is nice too. You can be outside in the sun and it's not.
The liquid
Ah.
sun, yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, well, the liquid sun. Usually the rain starts in October.
Oh, that.
You get some nice days, but last year was a phenomenal year for coho. Just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Would be nothing to go up and catch, you know, a dozen in about an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Wow. Is this the same? Oh no, you said the Quinsam, not the Campbell.
The Quinson, yeah. It's more or less a large brook.
Right.
It's some really nice pools on it if you want to go for a walk.
Does it? Well, I guess once the rains start, you start to get enough water flow in there too.
Well, they also control the water flow as they do in the Campbell. So the great advantage of the Campbell and the Quinson is they can control the water flow, which other, you know, like somebody told me that they started on the Cowage and started backing the water up, but they won't back it up enough to hold it throughout the summer because the residents that have properties along the waterfront don't want it to flood their properties. So anyways.
Well, Dave, can you stop recording?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, it's been going on.